300 years. When's it all going to stop, the killing and the violence? When all...
No? Okay. Well, we are going to get started. We still have people who are joining. And in fact, the president of the Tuskegee University SGA just joined us. And I want to thank everybody, though, who has joined. I'm going to mute everybody with the exception of myself, Omari Neal, and our featured speaker, Mr. Rozell Chappell. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Of course, I'm Karen Hopkins. I'm Executive Director of the Tuskegee Area Chamber of Commerce. We've convened this Zoom session, actually a 3-day schedule of speakers, each of whom has announced intentions to run for mayor. Now, of course, this is informal because qualifying has not begun, and that won't happen for a few more weeks, after which we'll have an election in August, and the person who is chosen by voters to be the next mayor of Tuskegee will take office in November and run our city from 2020 until 2024. Got a couple of housekeeping rules for everybody. To keep the process orderly, we're going to ask that you type your questions in the chat box. And we have recruited a communications specialist who's doing a great job at that in our community. Omari Neal will actually read your questions. The questions will be directed to our guest for this evening, who is Mr. Rozell Chappell. Prior to his engagement by the speakers, I will ask a few questions because the Chamber, of course, represents the business community, and we have a few questions that we're going to ask each candidate. We have 3 questions that will be asked of each candidate so that we can have some consistency in the responses. So we're going to invite Mr. Chappell to give a brief introduction, and that will be followed by 3 questions that I will ask, after which the floor will be opened to each of you who has chosen to join us. Of course, as I said, we have a 3-day schedule. The schedule ends on Thursday of this week with mayoral candidate Jamel McDade. Tomorrow, we will host incumbent mayor Tony Haygood. And tonight, again, our featured guest is mayoral candidate Rozell Chappell. Mr. Chappell, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Yes, good evening to Ms. Hopkins and to the members of the Tuskegee Area Chamber of Commerce. I am Rozell Chappell Jr., and I'm a candidate for mayor in the 2020 mayoral race. I'm a local business person, native son of Tuskegee. I've served many years, 15 years on the Tuskegee Area Chamber of Commerce as the secretary. I have served previously on the Tuskegee City Council for 4 years. I'm a former chairman of the Tuskegee Planning Commission for 14 years. And I'm a member of the Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church, Tuskegee, where I serve as chairman of the Deacon Ministry and chairman of the Finance Ministry. I'm a U.S. Army veteran and an Eagle Scout. And there's more information about me we can discuss later in this or on my Facebook page at Rozell Chappell, candidate for mayor.
Does that conclude your introduction?
Yes, ma'am.
I have 3 questions to ask you. One of them, the first one, is a yes or no answer. And it is Tuskegee a business-friendly city?
No.
What would you do to make Tuskegee more business-friendly?
Well, the first thing that I will do is to collaborate with the chamber and its board and its members to identify some concerns collectively from the business community. I'm aware of some concerns that businesses have, but in order to engage in changing policy, then I would first just get a comprehensive list, and we would gather that data from meeting with the chamber board and its membership to get a total comprehensive input. The second thing that I would do is train our staff within city government on the relationship and the importance of the business community and city government. You know,
Just a sec. One option.
the city depends upon the business community in order to operate. In fact, a third of the city's budget is revenue generated from the business community through the $2 million sales tax that's collected by local businesses, through $500,000 in business licensing that's from local businesses, the employees' 3% occupational tax that comes from those employees of local businesses, the businesses that pay the garbage fees for the city, as well as the property taxes that's collected on business-owned properties in the city. The next item is I was looking to the area relating to the difficulty in obtaining a business license. You know, I feel that a business should be able to at least start the process of obtaining a business license via the internet through the city's website. You currently can't access to receive a business license through the city's website. There's not very much information there for a new business that's considering to do business in our city, for local businesses or if they're out of town. So I would start with creating an online application for a business license. I would make sure that a copy of the city's comprehensive plan was available and on the website and published in the Tuskegee Public Library like it used to be. I don't know what happened to it. We used to publish it and have it on display at the Tuskegee Public Library, at the Tuskegee Library. The zoning ordinance, so that developers and businesses would have access to our zoning ordinance. It should be online and available for view on the city's website. And then there needs to be a contact person identified, that if there's a business that's interested in locating to Tuskegee, there should be a contact person identified on the city's website at who that prospective business should contact to talk about business development opportunities in our city. The next thing that I would do is create an emergency service policy for out-of-town businesses that handles service-related services. I give an example of two issues that local businesses have already brought to my attention that have occurred to local businesses. One is a local supermarket. Their meat freezer went out on a Sunday. They called in a business from Montgomery to repair that meat freezer. When the person came to town, they didn't have a city business license because they don't normally do business in Tuskegee. That person was directed that they couldn't operate on the meat freezer because they didn't have a city business license. The gentleman offered to give his business card so that he could save the meat from spoiling with a local grocery store. And he was instructed by a city employee that if you can't get a business license today, it's Sunday, you can't fix the freezer. So and we've had another situation where a local gas station had a gas pump. Someone ran into a gas pump and it turned over. The person that needed to repair the gas pump was an out-of-town business that don't normally do business in Tuskegee. He too was told that he had to wait till on Monday to come and upright the gas pump, which is a very dangerous situation to have left laying down over the weekend. So I would create policies so that our local businesses are not affected by policies under the current administration the way they are. So I would make it where we're business friendly, so that we don't cost our local businesses money, and that our citizens their safety is not jeopardized regarding like the gas pump issue. So we could easily, create an emergency policy or a daily work permit that could be given. And if that information was online, the business could have purchased it online on Sunday and paid for it on Sunday. The next thing that I would do is I would just enhance the relationship from city government and the chamber. When I served on the city council as chairman of the city's finance committee and on the board of the Chamber of Commerce some 20 years ago, the chamber requested a $50,000 a year contract with the city that I wholeheartedly supported, so that they could hire a executive director along with handling other funds and operations of the chamber. I wholeheartedly supported at that time funding the chamber so that we can have a great business relationship between the business community and City Hall. I would institute what I call a Chick-fil-A customer service relationship at City Hall. I frequent Chick-fil-A a lot, not because I necessarily like the food. I do like the food, but one of the things that I'm always going to get at Chick-fil-A is friendly, customer, fast service. And that's the type of service and attitude that I think that our staff should have when dealing with citizens as well as businesses in our community. The next item that I would do is, and it's on my objectives as mayor, is recruit a community bank. Community bank is important to development in our community. We all can remember when there was the Alabama Exchange Bank in our city. It was locally operated, locally managed from our community. Local decisions were made for the most part in our community. And I just think a local community bank is what we need in our community as well. We have local businesses that are very community oriented. Give you a prime example, Mr. Nick Dowdale, who owns Provision Contracting. He probably has one of the only streets that has been paved in the past 4 years, but Mr. Nick Dowdale paid with his company funds to pave Torrance Street out of his own pocket. I don't think local businesses should have to pave their own streets because their vendors and their customers don't want to come on the street to damage their vehicles to coming to do business with Provision Contracting. But Mr. Nick Dowdale did that with his own funds. And I think there are public funds that's earmarked just for paving streets. Same situation behind the Yellow Store. The street is in horrible disrepair. And I noticed on the agenda for the city council that their way of solving the problem is there's discussion that they're considering selling or deeding or giving Mr. Vaughn Tarver the street behind his store because the city don't want to expend the funds to pave it. I just don't think you ought to be asking, and we ought to make it a habit and become a practice that whenever a street needs paving, that we expect local business people to pave it. Another item that I think that I would change is the city has adopted the International Building Code for residential and commercial. And that building code, they're making requests upon businesses that want to renovate or develop in our city. They're asking businesses to do things that the city does not have the infrastructure to support. I'll give you a prime example. Mr. Stanley and Nina Maxwell bought a piece of an apartment complex with 4 units in the Green Fork area. The property was dilapidated. They purchased it. They wanted to renovate it to rent out to students. For almost a year, the property has been totally renovated, ready for occupancy. And when the building department had inspected it, they informed them that it needed a sprinkler system. Well, the Maxwells went and hired a company in Montgomery to install the sprinkler system. They installed the sprinkler system at about 70% completion. And then the sprinkler company determined that we need to do a test and determine whether the infrastructure is here that will support a sprinkler system. Well, the Maxwells have spent money for a sprinkler system. Well, the city doesn't have the water pressure nor the proper water line that will make the sprinkler system operate properly. So the property is sitting there now because what they're doing now is trying to get permission from the state of Alabama to bore a hole or the pipes underneath the 4-lane highway in the Green Fork area near the Chevron gas station to service the sprinkler system. So I think government is we've adopted an ordinance that the city can't support. There's no sprinkler system in the Gomillion building. There's no sprinkler system in the municipal complex. And in fact, there's no sprinkler system in the fire department. But we're imposing regulations on citizens that the city can't support the infrastructure.
Does that wrap up?
Yes, that's a wrap up. Yes.
Thank you for your answers to our questions. We will now move to questions from our participating constituents. And again, Omari Neal will read those questions. We ask each of you, if you have something to ask of Mr. Chappell, that you type it in the chat box to the right. And again, Omari Neal will verbalize your questions. Thank you, Omari, for agreeing to participate. And I think we're ready to start asking questions.
Yes, I received one question already. The first question is, wonderful ideas. How can some of these ideas be implemented with the manager/council form of government?
Mr. Chappell?
Okay. Thank you for the question. You know, the manager, people are intimidated by us having a city manager. And I think that our citizens, it has not been communicated to them very well how the city manager council form of government operates. The way it operates is the mayor and council, they hire he or she to be the city manager for the city. The city manager is only responsible for managing the day-to-day operations of the city. It's the mayor and council who jointly decides the direction for the city manager. They give him goals. They should give him goals and objectives to achieve. And then that person is monitored. That person is supervised by the manager, by the mayor and council as a body, not by an individual. None of the city council persons nor the mayor can give directives to the city manager on a day-to-day basis. Any direction that the city manager receives has to come as a sitting body, and they can direct him, instruct him or her to perform any task that the body decides.
Okay. The next question is, what makes you different from the former mayors?
Well, I'm a business person and I understand business. I understand that we have to manage our city as a business. I understand that city government is here to deliver services to our citizens at an affordable price. And I think we're paying more than affordable price as citizens for services, but I don't think that we're receiving those services. And I'm a person that believes in giving people the tools and resources that they need to accomplish a job. I believe in monitoring them. I believe in inspecting what I expect, and I just look for results. I've never in my life had a job that I wasn't awarded for by my performance. And so I just, I'm used to making a payroll. I understand what that means. And, I'm there just to make sure that we receive the quality of life that we as citizens deserve. And I just don't see whether we're receiving that now. Our streets are not being paved. Our trash is not being picked up. Our garbage is being picked up on a regular basis, but our trash, which includes, our limbs and mattresses and TVs, is not being picked up on a regular basis. And a part of our fees that we're charged that's on our utility bill, that's collected by the utility, but it goes to the city. There's a cost for garbage and there's a cost for trash. And we're supposed to be getting a weekly service for garbage and a weekly service for trash. And you all know that we're not receiving that weekly service. So I just want us so what makes me different is I'm gonna hold the city manager accountable. I'm so glad we have a city manager that I don't have to talk to several department heads to get an issue resolved. I only have to, the mayor and council only has to deal with the city manager.
Okay. The next question is, what are your top 3 objectives during your first 2 years in office?
Well, my top 3 objectives are: 1, our 911 system does not work effectively if you dial 911 from your cell phone. That's a high priority for me. And the reason it's a high priority, we had, at my church, Mount Olive Baptist Church, we had a member that was at choir rehearsal, Mrs. Loretta Calhoun. She passed out at church at choir rehearsal. And we dialed 911, several members dialed 911. And it was 45, 50 minutes later before anyone ever showed up. And it took a long time before anyone ever answered the telephone. And we've later learned that it's because the 911 signals don't receive properly from a 911 phone call. So there's a lot of things that we need to do in our city. I put 911 at the top of the list because there's no greater asset that we have in our community than the lives of our citizens. And so that 911 is most important because we can fix a lot of other problems and we'll have a second chance and a third chance. But we can't bring a Loretta back. We can't bring a Willie Streeter back who had the very same issue happen to him while he was at the dialysis center. So 911 is number 1. Number 2 is similarly related. I will work tirelessly with our local healthcare agencies that are currently in Tuskegee to try to get them to expand to have an urgent care facility so that we can stabilize a person if they should have a medical emergency like a heart attack, a stroke, diabetic coma, major car accident, gunshot, stab wound. So the urgent care facility, I would certainly try to get our local facilities to expand to those services. If they do not, I will go outside of our community and try to recruit a facility or entity to locate emergency services to stabilize a person and then eventually be transported to a hospital in another city. My third item would be to just beautify our city. I have a list of over 100 structures that have already been identified by the city staff that should be torn down and demolished. Homes right on Main Street, on our major thoroughfares, they've been burned out for several years and they have not been abated according to the city's abatement policy. I'm already asked for 3 items or 4?
3.
3, okay, those are the top 3: beautification, 911, and the urgent care facility.
Okay, thank you. Next one says, speak to us about current costs of utilities and the impact those costs have on the city's progress.
Well, they certainly have an impact because, as each of you know, we have constantly lost population over the past several years. We've gone from a 16,000 population city to 8,418 people the last census count. And I would encourage each of you, if you have not filled out the census, to please do so, so that we can receive all the resources that we need when we're properly counted. But the utilities is a factor. But I think we also have to, and one of the areas that I have on my agenda to try to reduce is our sewage rate. Currently, our sewage rate for residential services is, your sewage bill is 152% of what your water bill is for sewage for residential. For our business community, it's 172% of your water bill is your sewage bill. Now, what does that equate to in dollars and cents? If your water bill for residents is $100, then your sewage bill is $152. If you're a business, if your water bill is $100, your sewage bill is $172. Now, we shouldn't be paying more for sewage than we are for water in our city. And I think that the Utilities Board is financially strong enough that we can reduce the cost of our sewage to give our citizens some relief. The Utilities Board currently has a budget of $24 million, and they're buying property all over the city. And so that money, if they have enough money to be buying property, which should be left up to the businesses and developers, then they should have enough money to give our citizens some relief on their utility bill, because that's one of the reasons that our citizens are leaving town, because of the high utility bill. And I know some people don't equate the total bill, because it's not all electric. It's water, electric, sewer, and our garbage is on that bill as well. So we all call it the, light bill, but it's not all the light bill.
Okay. Will you form a downtown development task force to determine what is needed to make our downtown produce tax dollars for us?
Well, the city already has a downtown development entity that's been created. I don't think there's been any new appointments to that board during this administration. So the board is already in place. They just need to be activated. We need to find citizens and business people that have an interest in developing the downtown area. We have a strategic plan for the downtown, but I don't think decisions have been currently made. And looking at the updated 2011-2025 business plan for the city. So we have plans in place. It's just a matter of getting citizens involved to implement.
Okay. Next question. Why did you move your business from Tuskegee to Montgomery?
Okay. Well, I have one business that's still in Tuskegee. I've always had a business in Tuskegee for the past 30 years, but I'm glad that someone asked that question. I moved my automobile business to Montgomery because it was a business decision. I've had multiple locations in Tuskegee. The cars that I sell, I don't sell enough of them in Tuskegee to get a return on my investment. People, they don't have there's not enough jobs in the community that would support the return that I needed on my investment. And so it was just a business decision. But I do have a business in Tuskegee. I've had several businesses over the years. I used to own Talaferro's restaurant, part of Talaferro's restaurant. My construction company is located in Tuskegee now. And when I'm mayor and we bring some jobs to Tuskegee where people can afford the quality cars that Elite Automotive Group sell, then I will bring the business back. And, but I got my start there in Tuskegee, and I wrestled for years, about closing that place, but it just became an economic decision that my brother and I own the business, and I'm not going to operate a business in Tuskegee just for the love of Tuskegee. I'm in business to make money.
Okay. They also inquired to see, what is the name of your business in Tuskegee?
It's Jaden Construction Services, Inc. It's located at 4215 West Martin Luther King Highway, Tuskegee, Alabama, directly across the street from Solomon Chapel Church. And I don't do business with the public. I'm a federal contractor where I do stuff directly for the federal government.
Okay. How can the city integrate more with the university to leverage assets, casting down the buckets where you are?
Well, I think what we have to do is we have to form relationships with the university. And it has to be a situation of, whenever I'm entering into any type of business transaction with individuals and partnerships, I always tell the potential person that the relationship has to be a win-win relationship. And when I say win-win, that means I win sometime and you win sometime, not that you win twice. And that's the way the relationship has to be with the university. I know that I always hear that we have a great relationship with the university, but I don't know that we really do have a great relationship with the university because, the city is in the garbage business and the university, advanced disposal picks up the garbage for the university. So that's an entity or industry within itself in our community. So that's just one way of us strengthening the relationship with the university. I think we have to improve the housing in our community so that we can get the administration of staff to live in our community as well. So I just think that we just have to sit down at the table with the leadership at the university and let's just come to the table and talk about what we have to do as a community to get them involved in the decision-making process. And let's just be a city that has a university, not just a town with a university in it, but just let's have a true town and gown relationship.
Okay. Next question is, how are local citizens who qualify receiving an opportunity to be hired?
I don't think that the opportunity is there for currently. Certainly, I'm going to do all I can to always support hiring local. It's ironic that someone said that we have a chief of police who does not live in the city of Tuskegee. For the past 50 years, the police chief has been required to always live within the police jurisdiction of our city. This is the first chief of police since I was born that's never lived within the police jurisdiction of our city. The assistant chief does not live in our city. The past 2 city managers have not lived in our city. And many department heads, I just think that we need to be equal in an opportunity to government, where when there are positions open and available, I had a citizen ask me, they told me that they post positions on Indeed. Well, if we're a city of Tuskegee, why can't we post our positions in the local newspaper so local people can apply? Why can't we post positions that are available on the city's website so we can hire our local people? The current administration is not going out recruiting any industry or businesses. The least you can do is when there's a position open at City Hall, give our local citizens an opportunity to apply. And I would be 100% for, supporting local businesses, doing business with the city, and hiring local people that are qualified. And I'm not going to hire you just because you live in Tuskegee. You have to be qualified, and you have to. And I want to be open. If there's a position open, interview several candidates, and you hire the best qualified candidate for the job. And there's some qualified people in our city.
Pardon me, Mr. Chappell. Omari, Dr. Harrington has her hand raised, and as we well know, she often asks for a point of personal privilege. Dr. Harrington, are you asking to be heard? Dr. Harrington, you can unmute your mic. Okay, perhaps I misread her intentions. Amari, you can go back to the questions in the chat box.
Okay. Someone stated and also asked, some of the buildings you are speaking of needed to be torn down and are still standing. What happened during your time as city council member that they did not come down?
Well, when I was on the city council, we tore down 65% of the dilapidated properties. These properties that are dilapidated now have gotten in this condition within the past 20 years. And I have the resolutions from the city to prove that these structures didn't exist when I was in office, because we got them torn down, just like the ones where, and I know some people may be too young to realize it, but where CVS is currently located, we recruited CVS to town when I was in office, and that whole block was just about dilapidated. From the Connor Brothers hardware store to the property on the corner that the Satchels owned, where we had already found a couple people dead in the building, animals in the building, but we got that whole corner revitalized and recruited CVS on that corner today. But there are several properties throughout the town that we've gotten torn down. There was over 65 structures, about 65% of the dilapidated structures were torn down between 1996 and 2000.
Okay. Next question is, what kind of tax breaks will you offer business in order to recruit new industries in Tuskegee?
Okay, thank you for that question, because that's one of the things that I will certainly be, that I will offer. It's apparent sometimes that government only offers certain tax breaks to your large businesses. And I think that the small business tax investment, or their money's invested, is just as important as a large investor. I'll give you a prime example. A developer from Auburn has already contacted our local government a couple of years ago and asked for tax incentives, and he wasn't allowed to receive tax incentives. And there's a program that the state of Alabama allows. It's called a 772 sales tax incentive. And the way that 772 sales tax incentive works is this. Let's just say if a developer locates a building downtown Tuskegee, he purchases that building for $200,000. He invests $200,000 in the building to fix it up. So he has an investment of $400,000 in that building. The city can negotiate with that developer and tell him that he or she, that if you've invested $400,000, you collect the 11.5% sales tax, and you determine the amount that the city receives, then we will give you X amount of dollars of your $400,000 investment back over a period of so many years. So in essence, if an investor invests $400,000 downtown, the city can rebate him a portion of the sales tax that he generated up front after it's collected and remitted to the city. And you can send that money back to that local business quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, up to $200,000. Let's just say if he invested $400,000, you agree to that investor that you'll reimburse him 50% of his investment back over a period of years. And that's done every day and twice on Sundays in Auburn. And that's why you see their development is so strong in Auburn. And when I'm elected mayor, I have that same developer who's ready to invest in buildings downtown Tuskegee if we'll allow him to use the 772 sales tax incentive.
Okay. How have you contributed to the betterment of Tuskegee in recent years?
Well, in recent years, I've done a lot to contribute. Mostly in recent years, I've just worked as an advocate of helping people through my church. And, I've supported scouting. I've supported the local BTW, their football team at BTW, and just helping people locally. I got out of politics, 20 years ago, and I just decided I got off the chamber board, and, I spent 14 years on the planning commission from 2002 to 2016. So, the planning commission is a non-paid position. So, I had given 18 years of public service, and I just, you know, I just thought I had given enough of my, I think each of us, as a good friend of mine used to say, we all should pay some civic rent. I thought I had paid my civic rent during that 18-year period. But here lately, I'm just not seeing Tuskegee. You know, I hear gunshots throughout the city. You know, my pastor's house has been shot in, and I hear gunshots in my neighborhood all night, you know, and I just don't think they're doing anything about the problems of our city. And so that's why I'm committed to providing the leadership to bring the quality of life that we deserve.
Okay. Next question. As crime statistics contribute to higher insurance costs, what current projects that help with crime would you keep, and what new initiatives have you thought of?
Thank you for that question, because I have already talked with law enforcement outside and inside of our community. And one of the factors that determine our crime rates is how our community look. It was very ironic to me to hear individuals who've graduated from the FBI Academy tell me that criminals look at a community and they say, you know what, this is a great target because it looks like government don't care anything about this community. They won't clean it up. They won't pick up the trash. So how we look affects our crime rate. The second thing that I would do is I would institute and contact the Department of Transportation. We don't have any cameras in our city that's by the Department of Transportation or by municipal government. There are all kinds of Homeland Security grants that we can receive to have cameras in our community. Cameras are law enforcement's very best friend next to a nosy neighbor. So we don't have cameras in our community. Most of the crimes that are solved, they're solved from local business persons who have cameras in their businesses. So cameras would be one of the top items, and cleaning up our community so that, people are not sleeping in these houses, not committing crimes, not hiding in wooded areas because it's not cleaned up. So beautifying our community is going to help our crime. The next thing, that will help with crime is we need more police officers. Understanding that most day and nights, we only have 2 or 3 police officers on a shift at a time. That's not acceptable.
Okay. So Scott Muhammad is interested in asking a question, Ms. Hopkins.
Scott?
Can I get on now?
Dr.
Can
Harrington?
you hear me?
Dr. Harrington?
Can you hear
me? Dr. Harrington, we can hear and see you, and you had asked first to verbally ask a question, so we are granting you the point of privilege.
Well, I see my question finally got to the to Amara after I hit enter. It took me 3 hours to find enter. My question, though, if I may ask at this time, Mr. Candidate, what is the real propelling force that has drawn you to announce your candidacy for mayor? What is the real down to earth?
Is that the question, Dr. Harrington? Is that Ms. Hopkins?
I think her question again was, what is the real down-to-earth reason that is motivating you to seek the office of Mayor of Tuskegee?
Okay, thank you, Dr. Harrington, for that question, because I want to make this answer as clear and as down-to-earth as I can get. When there are problems in our community and I don't see them getting addressed, I'm a business person and I will remain in the business community, whether I'm elected mayor or not elected mayor, I'm going to remain a business person. But the down-to-earth reason is this: when I have a church member that dies because 911 won't work, that's you can't get more down to earth than that there's a problem in the community. The law enforcement individuals know it's a problem, and they won't address it to do anything about it. When we have citizens that are dying on the way to the hospital, to Montgomery and Auburn, our current leadership, and I understand, oh, it's the emergency care, that's a county problem. No, it's not a county problem. When you live within the city limits of Tuskegee, when I was on the council, you talk about, what did I do? When I was on the council 20 years ago, we had an emergency ambulance service in the city of Tuskegee and had some of the best paramedics ever. In fact, the paramedics that did arrive at Mount Olive Missionary Baptist Church when Miss Loretta passed out, it wasn't Haynes Ambulance, it was a Tuskegee Fire Department that we eventually dialed directly. And that's a problem too, because we used to be able to dial 727-2600 and get the fire department directly. We can't do that anymore. When I look over our community and I see trash, I see mattresses, I see limbs that haven't been picked up for 6 months or 8 months. When I talk to citizens and their streets haven't been paved, when I know that we receive $250,000 per year from 4-cent gasoline tax, 7-cent gasoline tax, and capital improvement money from the state of Alabama, and the only expenditure that the law says you can spend that money on is paving and repairing streets or retiring bond issues where you borrowed money to pave streets. And when I see we haven't paved not one street in our city that the city paid to have paved, not talking about the state highways and the federal highways that the federal government paved, I'm talking about the money that the city received that they should have paid. Yeah, I love selling cars, but I don't want to sell someone a car just because they tore up their car on bad streets in Tuskegee. Why? Because I know our citizens need a bank. We don't have a community bank in our community. We have PNC Bank. That's not a community bank. Your decisions are made. They receive money on deposit, but they don't loan most of the money out within our community. Why? Because my church provides food to the needy in Tuskegee, and we have a senior citizens program that receives a grant from South Central Alabama Development Commission, but there's a waiting list in order to feed our senior citizens who's homebound and ill. What's the down to earth reason? Is because I don't want a senior citizen to be hungry in our community when the city could just add a little more money to the funding, or someone that cared at City Hall could call SCAD and says, we need our funding increased because we can show you why we need it increased, because we have a waiting list of seniors who need more food at home. Why am I running? That's a great question, Dr. Harrington. We have a Head Start facility that the city used public funds to buy the land from Tuskegee University 10 years ago. The federal government, the Department of Health and Human Services, they approved the funding for a $2 million Health Start facility on Taylor and Franklin Road. It's 10 years later, and our 3-year-old and our 4-year-old children, they're still having classes in a modular building. We're still renting office space for our Head Start Central office downtown Tuskegee. That ought to be retail business space downtown. That's why I'm running. You know why else I'm running, Dr. Harrington? The down to earth reason is because Albert Park has trees growing out of the swimming pool. Our children don't have recreation in our community. When I was on the council 20 years ago, we provided $100,000 the first year for recreation to the YMCA. We provided $75,000 each year thereafter for recreation. You know what the youth at Booker T. Washington High School told me a few weeks ago? They said, Mr. Chappell, I'm 18 years old. I've never seen a good Tuskegee in my lifetime. When we go out of town, we're embarrassed to tell people we're from Tuskegee because of the way it looks. That's the down-to-earth reason that I'm running. That's the only reason I'm running for mayor of Tuskegee, because there are so many things in our community they're not getting done.
Okay. Mr. Scott Muhammad, you can now ask your question.
Thank you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I'm listening to the discourse and the answers, and I gotta say that if this were the beginning of last year, much of what you say would be engaging. But we are having a discussion in the context of a worldwide pandemic. Tuskegee has saw a dramatic increase of its cases. We are having something like 5 a day now. We had our first 1,000 case days recently. We have 30 minutes to our west an outbreak where the hospitals are full, and not only are the ventilators fully engaged, but also the ECMO machines.
Amen.
We have found from the scientists in Montgomery that the virus has evolved and has become much more contagious. What has been your citizens' response to the unique needs of Tuskegee residents in their most vulnerable parts to the COVID-19 pandemic? And 2, what protocols are you prepared to engage to protect the community, i.e., I think we have between 6 and 8 public housing tracts, each public housing tract full with single mothers with children. When the single mothers began to engage this virus, what protocols do you have in place to deal with the children? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad. And it's a very good question. But let me share with you that I'm not currently the mayor. If I were the mayor, I would be doing things much differently than we're currently doing as relate to COVID-19. I understand that we recently had an employee at City Hall that tested positive. Well, City Hall didn't follow the CDC guidelines for its own staff member. I understand the staff member works on the first floor of the building, and the proper quarantining has not been followed. The entire building was not shut down and sanitized properly from the first floor to the second floor. And then the community was not even notified, of the employee testing positive. Whomever that employee may or may not have come in contact with, those persons needed to be notified. So many of the CDC guidelines, they have not been followed. And the city has a public access TV station, public access radio station. And the reason they're public access is because you need to get information to the public. And I just think I don't see any enforcement from our law enforcement. There's been congregating and parties throughout the community. And if you have an ordinance, or if you created a resolution or whatever action the mayor and council took as relates to stay-at-home order and no gathering, then you have to let the police officers enforce it. I mean, laws are no good if they're not enforced. And we're doing that to keep the spread of the virus down. And I just don't see that enforcement. You know, the children are around the lake, there are parties all over the city, and maybe they're not enforcing it because they don't have enough staff for a police department. But it's such a pandemic that if the city can't enforce the law, they should have contacted the sheriff department and got help from the sheriff department. And that's why in my organizations and in my church, we operate with organization, teamwork, and communication. And those are three elements of leadership that I would bring to the table as mayor: organization, teamwork, and communication. And I just think.
I think you, I'm sorry, I may not have been clear with my question. My first question was, what was your citizens' response?
Well, the citizens' response is, is that the city was not providing PPE equipment to its staff. They didn't provide training, safety training for how to interact with citizens with equipment and proper procedures. So the response is that the citizens feel that government hasn't done anything.
Okay, and with the question of the protocol, I heard you speak to really what Donald Trump speaks to, the law and order of your city. I for one would not necessarily be in favor of a strong crackdown on our young people who may be handling the crisis wrong. There's a lot of anxiety right now. There's a lot of fear right now. There's a lot of uncertainty right now. You have 40 million people out of work and don't know when they're getting back to work. And in Tuskegee, you had an unemployment crisis before the pandemic. So what with cross burnings and lynchings and hangings, and I'm sorry, Brother Hopkins, I'm just trying to get my minds off. Yes, sir, thank you. What with these things, do you think that a different tact or approach with our youth might be in order?
Well, let me say this. I've been very engaged with our youth, and our youth has a great deal of respect for local law enforcement. They have good relationships with them, and it's all about how they are approached. And I think if our youth was approached from a sense of humility from law enforcement, that they're there with concern about their health and safety, and that this virus is real and is serious, and we're asking you not to congregate and not to be in large groups. We're asking you to maintain social distancing. We're asking you, in fact, I would have long time ago instituted that, recommended to the council that all citizens in public wear masks. So there's just a lot of things that, and I'm not second morning quarterbacking. It's just that when the CDC has the scientists, as you said, that's, I'm not an expert, especially in the medical field, but there are professionals that I would seek their advice. We have nurses and we have doctors locally, and we have CDC, we have state resources that are giving cities and counties and states of guidelines of what to do. And I don't see them being followed even in our city.
So, Mr. Muhammad, thank you so much. And I think maybe you and Mr. Chappell should have direct communication moving forward. So thank you for your questions. Omari, we are being asked why some people are allowed to ask their questions verbally and others are relegated to the chat box. In the interest of fairness, as we begin to wind down, we're going to allow people to ask their own questions out loud. Do we have anybody who wants to do that at this moment? we have opened that option to people, so we will then return to the format we have been using, whereby Omari has been reading the questions that are typed into the chat box. Omari.
Okay, and I see Mr. Reginald, I guess he just took his hand down. He did have it up. Let's make sure. Mr. Reginald, did you have a question?
Have you opened my mic?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And that person answered my question, or they asked my question. It seemed to have been a double standard. Some could speak and some followed the stated guidelines. So I've been around Tuskegee since 1986. I went to the university there, and in my humble opinion, that's an example of what goes on in Tuskegee. Some follow the rules and some don't.
Yeah, we did that initially, if I may explain, to maintain order. And it seems that everybody's on their best behavior. So you can be flexible. We can be flexible. It wasn't intended to give special privileges to anyone to the detriment of others. Again, it was done to maintain order.
I am definitely for order. I thank you. I yield the balance of my time.
Omari, do we have more?
Okay, we do. The next question is, Mr. Chappell, what's your plan to revitalize the YMCA and youth programs in Tuskegee?
Well, I don't have any concrete plans regarding, well, the YMCA is not an option for me, but what I have made a commitment to the youth is this. They want to see Abbott Park revitalized. And what I inform them is when I'm elected mayor, I'm not going to have the city council and mayor and other individuals sit around the table and determine what type of facilities is renovated for Abbott Park without the youth being at the table. If they want the swimming pool and that's what the youth of the community want, then we'll repair that swimming pool. If they want tennis, if they want the basketball court, if they want the softball field. When I was young, in the building where the Macon County Head Start was last located, we had pool tables, ping pong tables, but that would just be up to them. I want the youth to have input on how that park is renovated. And I think it's less expensive probably to renovate Abbott Park than it is a city park, but we do have two parks, and I'm aware that we have two parks, and I've had some ask me about city park, but in my opinion, it appears that it would cost less to renovate to start with Abbott Park. And so I would just move along. I don't have any concrete ideas. I just know that the youth need recreation. Our youth, I looked at the graduation rate at BTW. I looked at how many of our youth are going to higher education, and our crime rates for youth is not as high as it could be, since we don't have any outlets for them for recreation.
Okay. Next question is, do you expect to accomplish everything in 4 years? If not, why do you assume the current administration can?
Say the last part of the question again.
Yes, I'll repeat the whole question for you. It says, do you expect to accomplish everything in 4 years? If not, why do you assume the current administration can?
No, we can't accomplish everything in 4 years, but what we can certainly do is start just like, I can't eat an elephant in one day, but one bite at a time, I can eat that elephant. And that's how we have to tackle our problems or our challenges in Tuskegee, is one bite at a time. And what I will say is this, I will be more aggressive and more progressive at attacking these problems. It won't be that I'll be sitting around twiddling my thumbs trying to, stretch out the time. I'm gonna do all I can starting day one. In fact, I've already started. I've already started talking to developers. I've already started talking to people and developing plans for tearing down the dilapidated properties. I've already started, so I'm going to hit the ground running come the first Monday in November because I'm already working now.
Okay. We have an airport. Why that is not showing as a, okay, let me rephrase this question for you. We have an airport. Why is it not being shown as a stream of income to the city?
Well, it should be, and I think it is as a stream of income. The only revenue that I'm aware of, the financial reports for the city, they're, I'll just have to say they're in cloudy condition. I'll just say that. But from what I can see from looking at the budget, the only revenue that's being generated at the airport is probably fuel sales. I didn't ask to review contracts on whether we may have land leases with individuals that have hangars, but that should be a revenue source for the city, those hangars that are out there at the airport. But I didn't get into that. I certainly know that the airport will be, it's a vital part of economic development. And that's why when I was in office, we got the airport extended from 5,003 feet to 6,500 feet when I was in office. All of the fencing that's around the airport, we got that done when I was in office. And, the city has allowed it to grow up where, you see grass, weeds, and trees all over the airport, that it wasn't like that when we were in office 20 years ago. So the airport is a very important part of economic development, especially since it's located right near our industrial park and it's located right near Interstate 85.
Okay. Being a business person, I am sure you will work within the city budget. You cannot run the city on grants. Some people who once paid ad valorem taxes are not paying now. How do you plan to increase the revenue to do all the things you have mentioned?
Well, the city currently has a $9 million budget. The Head Start budget is $2 million. The utility board's budget is $24 million. That's a total revenue of $35 million. What I plan to do with the city council and city manager is prioritize our projects and get the best use of the taxpayer dollars and get the best bang for our buck. And we just have to prioritize all of our expenses and prioritize our revenues and just have good government that provides the services to our citizens that our citizens deserve. We can do a lot with $35 million. Most cities with 8,400 people don't have budgets or access to $35 million. We just have to manage it better than what we're doing. I talked to some firefighters that we're short-staffed with our fire department, where you have firefighters that are working 5 days straight. Well, you're supposed to be work 24 hours and all 48 hours. So math tells me if you're paying a firefighter time and a half, he's working 5 days straight. That's not good business, because you need to hire more people and then pay them the salary and not be paying time and a half for employees. And you don't want a firefighter working 5 days straight anyway. So we just have a lot of management issues and a lot of bad personnel decisions that are being made currently in the current administration.
Next question is, what will you do about financial transparency? Reports received at city council meetings are unspecific and not of value to every man.
I'm so glad you citizen asked that question, because I don't know why it's public information. So I don't know why when the city council received their financial report that the citizens that are attending the meeting can't have the same report that the mayor, council, city manager, city clerk, and the attorney receives. It's public information. And furthermore, if the citizens are not able to attend the council meetings, why isn't the financial statements online? You can access other cities and other county governments. Their financial statements are online. The minutes of the meetings are online. Our city, the minutes are not even online. If citizens can't attend the meetings, at least we ought to be able to go back and go online and read what actions were taken. So when I'm elected mayor, I promise you the citizens will have full transparency, accountability, and integrity to all public information. Now that won't include legal matters, personnel matters, and if we're engaging in recruiting of an industry or a business, that information can be handled in executive session. But other information, if it's public information, and that's why, I've done a lot of research, but every time I think of something, I have to write a letter to the city clerk, and then they request the information, you send it back. And it's just too encumbersome just to get information for public information. I agree with the citizen, and having access to minutes and financial records, I promise you, better days are coming when you elect me as your next mayor.
Okay, thank you. This is our last question. So if anyone has just any last questions, can you go ahead and put in the chat box? The next one is, Facebook is used to communicate issues related to COVID-19. Many people in our community do not have access to the internet, which impacts education as well. So let's see, I'll answer that again, ask that again. Facebook is used to communicate issues related to COVID-19. Many people in our community do not have access to the internet, which impacts education as well. And they asked that as a question.
Okay, well, I guess what the citizen is asking is that since some citizens do not have access to the internet, how can we communicate information to them when they do not have access to the internet and Facebook? Like I said, we have a public television station that information should be communicated to the citizens. We have a public radio station that could be communicated to them. And it's 2020. So the city could have an app. Most people may not have internet, but I promise you this, everyone in Tuskegee, including a 4-year-old child, has a cell phone. So the city could have an app, and then that information could be disseminated to everyone with a cell phone over a City of Tuskegee app.
Okay.
And
Next
we have
question.
an IT department. Creating an app shouldn't be complicated because I think we have a IT department in the city. I think I saw roughly. Anyway, I know we have an IT department in the city.
Omari, this will be our final question for you.
Okay. The last question is, what are your plans for bringing broadband?
I don't have any plans as related to broadband. I know that there's been an effort for years with the county, and I know there's been some federal efforts for broadband. So I just have to be honest. I don't have any plans on the horizon for broadband. I will just have to get with the chairman of the county commission and see where they are. I don't believe in duplicating any efforts at all. So I would just have to get with the chairman of the county commission and find out where they are, because I know he's been working on broadband for some time, and I just have to get an update on where he is, because I don't want to do anything to duplicate any services in a community of only 18,000 citizens in the county.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chappell. Now I'm turning it over to Mrs. Hopkins.
Thank you, Ms. Neal, for your communication services and your commitment to this community. I want to thank everybody who decided to spend this time with us. Hope it's been meaningful, enlightening, informative, and we know that this is a beginning, because qualifying hasn't even happened yet, and there may be even more candidates who may jump into the race. So the Chamber has offered this platform for you to get information from all three individuals who have announced their intentions to run for the office of the Mayor of Tuskegee. You have heard from Mr. Rozell Chappell Jr. Want to thank him for his time and for being candid with you this evening. Tomorrow, we will host incumbent Mayor Tony Haygood. He will join us at 5 o'clock, same time, same station, same format. Forgive me if it wasn't perfect, but I hope it was valuable. So we will see, I hope, most of you back here tomorrow. And then again on Thursday, when we host mayoral candidate Jamel McDade. Again, it will be at 5 o'clock. It will be a Zoom conference. We drop the link each morning to all of you all who have requested to receive the link so that you can access this conversation. If you know other people who want that link, feel free to share it. They can also contact the Chamber at ourchamberworks@gmail.com. Again, we thank you all for joining us, and good night.